Hey guys, so today we're going to kind of keep it to one video because our notes for today are super short because we're going to start our next document activity, which is looking at were the Dark Ages really dark. So today I will take notes on medieval Europe so that I can understand the development of medieval Europe socially, politically, and economically. I'll know I have it when I finish my Cornell notes, annotations, potential test questions, and summary, and you've gotten an 80% on the quizzes, so that's going to be part of the assignment today. The other thing that we're going to do is analyze primary and secondary sources about the Dark Ages so that I can develop an argument based on evidence about whether or not the Dark Ages are really dark. I will know I have it when I have developed an argument based on evidence about whether the Dark Ages were really dark. So I want you to watch the Medieval Europe Notes video, which is what you're watching right now. Take your Cornell notes, do your annotations, your potential test questions, and your summary. And then I want you to submit that summary into Unified Classroom to kind of show me that you're done with those notes, that you've done the work necessary. After you've done all of that, I do want you to complete the WH.14 quizzes, which is located in Unified Classroom. We're not taking formal quizzes during this time, for example, through Performance Matters, but we will be doing quizzes as kind of a formative assessment to see how we're progressing on this knowledge. What I really want you to be working on over the next couple of days is were the Dark Ages really dark? So I want you to start on that today, maybe do the textbook activities A and B, and then work on B, C, and D tomorrow, and then D and E and writing on Thursday. I'm not expecting this to be due until Thursday. Once you have finished, I do want you to submit your ACES plus E paragraph into the assignments in Unified Classroom, okay? There is a video analysis of the documents available if you really need some help getting through those documents. All right, so let's get started on the Cornell notes. There's only 2 slides, so it's very short today. So we've talked about the culture of the Middle Ages for quite some time now, really focusing in on the religion as a major aspect here, the focus on how people kind of lived on these feudal societies. So when we're talking about culture, just remember that we're talking about things that people wear, the way people acted, their belief system and whatnot. And during the Middle Ages, a lot of this is going to be based on religion, okay? As a result, many of these buildings are going to be churches that are their architectural achievements from this time period. Gothic style architecture is going to be very influential and, very popular during this time period. So in the top right corner, you can see a picture of Notre Dame, okay? And so that was one of the biggest buildings during this time period that kind of became known for the Gothic architecture. You can kind of see how it's really pointy. It does have arches, so it's kind of throwback to Rome, and a lot of really kind of pointy, edges. We'll look at it a little bit closer at Notre Dame when you're doing your document activity later. Many of the writings from the Middle Ages had to do with religion, so that's not a surprise since we know that there was such an emphasis during the Middle Ages on religion. So most of these writings are going to be sermons, songs, poems, all based, again, in religion. We've kind of talked about this before, but the monasteries are going to be the ones that have the reading and the writing, the ability to do those things. So we really see church scholars being the few people who could read and write. A lot of these monks are going to be translating Greek and Arabic into Latin, which makes the knowledge of the philosophy, medicine, and science that the Greeks and the Romans had done available. Churches are also going to be the first ones to establish schools. We know that under Charlemagne that was required. Okay? So European universities also are established during this time, during the late Middle Ages. So we do see an increase in knowledge of science, philosophy, math, astronomy, and medicine, a lot of the things that are, again, really important to the Greeks and the Romans. And there is a new educated class because schools are becoming more widely available to people outside of the church. It's still going to be about more wealthy people, though. So the last thing that we kind of need to talk about with the Middle Ages is the Black Death. And the Black Death kind of symbolizes an end of the Middle Ages because it's really a time period in which a lot of change is occurring. In history, we call this like a watershed moment. Watershed meaning just like a big turning point. That this is what leads into a big change in Europe where everything after that is completely different. Okay, so the Black Death, as we all pretty much know, is a devastating plague that swept across the European continent. It originates in Asia, primarily in China. It travels across the Silk Road through other conquering peoples, but primarily the Mongols, who then bring it to a city named Kaffa, in Central Europe, which then those people flee to Italy, and then it spreads from there. The Black Death was almost always fatal, meaning that people mostly died from it because it had these large blotches on the skin. It was a septicemic disease, which meant that it traveled through the blood and it spread really, 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 really quickly. Because they didn't have a lot of technology then, they didn't have a lot of understanding of medicine. People are going to, unfortunately, be very widely attacked. They don't have the communication that we have today. So the Black Death has a really wide-reaching effect on the population in general. About 1/3 of the population dies. Again, because the medieval Europe had been really, really religious, people start to blame God. That's the only person they know to blame for this plague. They start turning to witchcraft, trying to solve these problems for themselves, which leads again to this humanistic ideology in the Renaissance that we'll talk about a little bit later. Due to the loss of population, the plague also ends the manor system. Okay, so generally speaking, the feudal agreements are over. People in the north are still going to live in more isolated conditions in those smaller towns, but in the south, in Italy specifically, they're going to return to that really bustling trade, the merchant activity. Trade is disrupted as a part of the Black Death because the ships are going to have to be held off the coast. They're not going to be trading as readily because that is how they know that it was spreading quickly. Okay, so now that you've finished the notes, make sure that you do your annotations, your potential test questions, write your summary, and submit that in Unified Classroom. And then be sure to go and take the quizzes to kind of test yourself on this particular knowledge. You can do that until you get an 80%, and then go ahead and get a start on War of the Dark Ages really dark. Stay safe.